to welcome all of you on this third day of our conference and for our panel with the title Faith-Based Prophetic Practice. Now, this is going to be well, first of all, I have to say I took over from Pete Phillips, who was originally planned as the chair of this panel, but unfortunately he has some health issues. Some of you have already sent greetings and best wishes, and I'm sure this will all be put forward to him, Jonas, from the whole group, I suppose, and we wish him all the best for a quick recovery. So please give him our regards. But that's the background for me now being the chair of this panel. And we have a really true global trialogue, I would call it, with three people from quite different places and spaces. So first of all, and I will introduce the people one by one, just so that we have not the whole information right now about everybody. But just very briefly, we have three people. Anthony Leduc from Thailand, Bangkok. I will introduce him in a minute. He's in Japan at the moment. And then we have Aline Amaro de Silva. She's from Brazil, Porto Alegre. And then we have Katleho Mokoena from Pretoria in South Africa. So this is truly global again, this morning or this afternoon or this evening or wherever you are. And so all the three of them, we have been in contact. I know a little bit of their impulses. They will share with us in a minute. And the idea is that we will listen to the three impulses first, and then we have a discussion among the three or four of us for some time, and then I'd like to open up the discussion for a plenary debate for another 25 minutes or so. So we have 1 hour and 15 minutes for this panel. Okay, now to start with Anthony. He's currently the director of the Asian Research Center for Religion and Social Communication, which is St. John's University in Bangkok in Thailand. Also teaching at Lux Mundi National Seminary of Thailand. Very impressive. It was built in 1972. It's a Catholic institution, and if you look into the pictures, the slides of this institution and the church especially, it's really impressive. Some of you know about his primary research interests already. He has already integrated himself yesterday in the debates. So his main interests are intersections between religion and contemporary issues, such as ecology, migration, technological development. He also just recently contributed to a very interesting book called Church Communication in the New Normal. So the situation of church after COVID-19 and all the challenges that come along with that in terms of digital communication, highly recommendable. Okay, Anthony, you will start with your presentation, and this will all be about what you called prophetic dialogue. So yes, we're looking forward to that. And so the floor is yours.
Okay, can I share my PowerPoint? Is that okay?
I hope it will work.
Let's hope so. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, good. Now let me just take this away. Okay, so good evening from Japan. I'm actually in Kobe, Japan right now on my sabbatical, so it's nice to join you from various parts of the world. So yes, my topic is on prophetic dialogue as in church engagement, and I guess it's sort of a practice, so to speak, in this digital context. And we can say that right now it's fair to say that humanity is on the verge of a cognitive revolution that sort of like the one 70,000 years ago that really brought a lot of changes to human society. And this new cognitive revolution is now driven by science and digital technology. And so the question then is, what is the role of the Catholic Church in the face of this new revolution? Obviously, religion is a stakeholder in this digital future, particularly the church. So what I'm proposing here is a framework called prophetic dialogue for engagement between the church and various stakeholders. And these stakeholders include technology innovators, policy makers, and end users. Now, the concept of prophetic dialogue encompasses two separate but interrelated aspects: energizing communication and criticizing communication. Now, I just want to go briefly through the list of stakeholders, not in details. So the first group, a major group, will be the technology developers and the companies who invest a lot of money and time into this digital development. Of course, governments and regulatory bodies who really will set the policies for how technology is to be controlled. Of course, consumers and end users constitute a large group of stakeholders in this digital future. Another group is communities and society at large, and also special interest groups such as environmental organizations and advocacy groups. And finally, religious institutions and their adherents. And among these would include the Catholic Church and its members. Now, what is a prophetic dialogue? It's actually a missiological concept that's been developed by the Society of the Divine Word. It's a missionary congregation of which I'm a member. And some of its members, such as Stephen Bevins and Roger Schrader, have developed this concept over the years. And it's gained acceptance among authors from diverse denominational backgrounds for mission. According to Stephen Bevins, prophetic dialogue is both theology and practice, requiring deep listening to the movement of the Spirit, deep reverence to the context in which one witnesses and proclaims the gospel, the cultivation of a habit of contemplation, deep conversation among whom and with whom a person or community is working. And prophetic dialogue finds its foundation in a practice of meditative discernment, collaborative examination, and theological exploration, which strives to bridge the gap between current experiences and the profound biblical and doctrinal traditions of Christianity. Now, because prophetic dialogue entails doing theology in specific contexts, it has to be discerned and undertaken by individuals who are directly involved in mission situations, so no armchair prophets. Prophetic dialogue is also to be understood as an implementation of the overall stance of the church on mission as dialogue. Dialogue is emphasized as fundamental to the mission of the church. The church acknowledges its necessity in engaging with diverse individuals and the demands of true humanity, and Christians are called to approach their mission with a dialogical spirit of respect and friendship, drawing inspiration from God's Trinitarian dialogue of love. Now, I think this has been asked in the previous days as well, but what is a prophet and what are the characteristics of a prophet? And so for me, a prophet is defined by his or her ability to listen and their commitment to their community. A prophet is informed and involved in the people and the situation on the ground. And he or she is invested in the well-being of the community and the common good. A prophet doesn't speak from a neutral position, but has to be rooted in his or her own faith with the aim of hearing the voice of the Spirit and moving forward. Prophets express their message with boldness, precision, and at times with indignation, not because they're opposed to the people, but rather because they're unwaveringly for the people. The anguish in tone or demeanor that comes from the prophet doesn't reflect hatred, condescension, or disrespect towards the people, but rather a deep concern for their lives. I would say there are two categories of prophetic communication. The first message is speaking forth, and the second message is speaking out or against. Speaking forth has the effect of energizing, and this is to use Walter Brueggemann's words. And speaking out and against has the criticizing function. Now, speaking forth, this prophetic speech has the transformative power to energize individuals, instilling positive attitudes and inspiring hope for a future characterized by new realities and genuine change, liberating us from the belief that change is merely a rearrangement of existing patterns and empowering us towards repentance, courage, and resistance against destructive forces. Speaking out or against is aimed at cutting through the numbness and self-deception and challenging individuals to confront the overwhelming experiences they often deny, while emphasizing the destructive consequences of disconnection, consumerism, exploitation, and oppressive systems that hinder genuine human connection and perpetuate inequality and suffering. Brockman says criticizing prophetic speech challenges us to see that the ultimate consumerism is consuming each other and eating off the table of a hungry brother or sister. So we won't have time to go into great details, but some of the qualities or acts of energizing communication would entail embracing speech, embracing the stakeholders, recognizing their crucial role in shaping a future where technology promotes human dignity, acknowledging the value of technology itself in improving lives, fostering communication and developing the earth in alignment with God's original plan, emphasizing responsible use and discernment to separate positive elements from potential pitfalls, and also envisioning a future where technology serves humanity and society while safeguarding against harm through wisdom and moral principles. Another aspect of energizing communication would be collaborative, and the church can facilitate encounters among various stakeholders and design encounters specific to the context of each group. One of the things the church can do is also advocate for a process of technological development that's with instead of for groups. Oftentimes, technology is developed for certain groups, for young people, for the elderly, for the handicapped, for minorities, and so on, and they become sort of passive recipients of these technologies. The question is, do they really need this technology? Is this the technology that they want? Is this exactly the way they want it? And a lot of times there's no input from these communities. So instead of just developing technologies for groups, we need to develop technologies with groups in conversation with them. And so the church can become sort of this advocate for this kind of process. And also the church can involve the lay people who are on the ground as part of the church's secular order to represent the church in dialogue. We shouldn't forget that the church has 1.3 billion members, and many of them are immersed in the process of the technological development and innovation, and also as users. So these people can actually play the role of prophetic dialogue very well on the part of the church if they are enlisted into this endeavor. And because dialogue or communication isn't just speaking, but also action, the church can model best practices by resisting the temptation to be the prophet of doom and gloom and creating this false or unnecessary moral panic when it comes to the technology. And church leaders can serve as examples of utilizing God's gifts in ecclesiological governance, pastoral outreach, and evangelization, modeling best practices to inspire positive trends in technology use and counter divisive, destructive, and humanizing practices. And also the church can draw insights from the laity and secular organizations that have harnessed technology for promoting life, addressing environmental issues, and combating hunger, and alleviating poverty. And finally, speaking out or against this criticizing communication, just briefly, the church can oppose the technocratic paradigm and pietism that sidelines religion as legitimate stakeholders. There's a belief that somehow the church and religion in general has sort of fallen off the scientific train. that maybe in the past they were very instrumental and at the forefront of scientific and technological development, but no more. Now they're just sort of reactive. But this is not the case. The church and religion is very much at the forefront of the science and also very much involved in the process of scientific research. And so the church is a legitimate stakeholder in this process and needs to claim its role in the process. The church can also call for change to directions in technological development that perpetuates unjust structures. And the church can also mobilize for accountability and responsibility by entities for innovations and ways of implementation that are unethical, devalue human integrity, and are death-dealing rather than life-giving. And here I'm using the language of the FABC, that everything can be sort of categorized, whether it is death-dealing or whether it's life-giving. And in technology, I believe we can also use this as a criteria for judging development. And finally, in terms of witnessing action, the church can provide support to those affected by technological development, displacement through social service programs and vocational training. I just read a news article today that in May, about 5% of jobs were displaced due to artificial intelligence. Through the church's pastoral programs, it can also promote responsible technology use, internet safety, digital literacy and wisdom, and digital citizenship. And the church can also foster a culture of discernment and reflection through spiritual practices that can promote a digital humanism that considers the impact of technology on society. Okay, I think I took more time than was given to me, so thank you very much, and I'll probably speak less later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Well, that's a huge program. I think it was time was needed for elaborating on such a huge program. So yeah, we'll see what to make out of all this in the discussion. Thank you very much for the moment. So let me just briefly introduce to you Aline Amaro de Silva. She's a journalist, a master and PhD in Catholic theology at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul, Porto Alegre in Brazil. And she's also an adjunct professor at the Philosophy and Theology Institute of the Pontifical Catholic University of Minas Gerais, and researcher in all the field of communication and theology. She just told me before this conference that she's on her way to Rome, where she will be in dialogue with people on the question of digitality, digitalization, education. So that also brings me to recommend a book of hers, or at least it's in English as an article. It's called The Digital or Catechesis in the Digital Age, From Transmission to Sharing. So where she kind of explores about the challenges for education and the digital realm and age. Okay, today she will very, in an actual sense, present something of a paper from the Vatican, which has just been released, and it's called Towards the Full Presence. So we will hear more about that full presence from a Catholic point of view, and I'm looking forward.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know if someone is good night. So when they invited me to do this panel, I was thinking about prophets. I never stopped to think really about it, so it was very interesting. And when came this document, I made some connections, and we will see if have a good reason to this. So thinking about faith-based prophetic practice. The church's prophetic action in the world, starting from the latest document published by Dicastery of Communication this Sunday. It was May 28 that they released this document named Towards Full Presence, a pastoral reflection on engagement with social media. It has been more than 20 years since this Department of Communication has published anything. So this document is very significant for this. In this moment, they released this paper. I think there is a prophecy for today's life in these words that they talk about. I understand the proposal of a full presence as a prophecy for today's hyper-connected life. This document points to the need to build a full presence in all the environments that human beings inhabit, promoting the full presence of the hyper-connected human being is one of the most important Christian prophetic missions for the networked, fragmented, and polarized society in which we live. So I will bring some parts of the document to think about it, if it's really a prophecy, the things that we need change or we need build this full presence. The document in the beginning says, great strides have been made in the digital age, but one of the pressing issues that still needs to be addressed is how we as individuals and as a church community are to live in the digital world with love of neighbor, genuinely present and attentive to one another in our common journey along the digital highways. Technological progress has made new kinds of human interactions possible. Indeed, the question is no longer whether, but how we should participate in the digital world. The aim is to address some of the main questions about how Christians should participate in social media. They are not intended to be exact guidelines for pastoral ministry in this area. Rather, it is hoped to promote a common reflection on our digital experience, encouraging individuals and communities to adopt a creative and constructive approach that can foster a culture of outreach. The challenge of fostering peaceful, meaningful, and caring relationships in social media raises the debate in academic and professional as well as ecclesiastical circles. So how the discourse, how the don't have this good dialogue between even Catholics, even Christians in the network. So this is the question, the problem that bring this document. Here in Brazil, we have experience of digital influencers, Catholic digital influencers, very powerful and very problematic too, challenging, because it's so polarized, have just two sides, you need choose one. So this document reflect this reality, not just from Brazil, and have some Brazilian researchers that participate in this construction of this document, but have many researchers and professionals that contribute in all world for this. So this is a background, the big problem, I think, that they try to reflect about. So thinking about who are the prophets, who are the prophets? The prophets is not only the one who announces the wonders of the Lord, the good news, but the one who denounces the deviation from the path pointed out by God for humanity. Through his teaching or her teaching, the prophet seeks to lead God's people to a full life. So the prophets in Israel present themselves as the fulfillment of God's word in the covenant, and keep the impulse with all the passion that ravishes their hearts and actions. So it exercises a mission that is almost never official, in the sense of being on behalf of the established powers and institutions. So when we think about the prophet, sometimes it doesn't have the connection with institutions. So it could be a problematic idea for, I'm talking that this document has a prophecy because it's institutional. But in this sense, an institutional document from the Vatican could not be considered a prophetic act. However, this document was prepared by listening to several prophets of the digital, that is, researchers and people who work in networks that not have an institutional link with this Holy See. So it's not completely institutional, has this contribution with other people of God. Prophecy is based on faith and relationship with God, not necessarily on the institutional. The prophet does not defend his own message, but a message through a warning that comes from his God. The prophets generally plays the role of critical conscience of the people, warning and denouncing actions of instituted power that are against God's law given to Moses. From this, we can wonder which powers are ruling the social networks today that are contrary to Christian teachings. Every baptized person, at least in Catholic Church, in Christian Church, is a prophet. Every baptized person receive the prophet anointing to speak in the name of the Lord. So when we think about it, the document brings the idea of the micro-influencers. Every Christian is a micro-influencer in every social network that we live, digital or not. So this idea came about, we can think about this idea of prophets and prophecy. Today, there are so many voices, so many prophets and false prophets too. To whom should I listen today? So this is a question. And the document says about how people learn someone, search in the network, in the internet for some voices. So how we can recognize the voices that lead us to a good way. These some questions. Other thing is the prophet is a sign of contradiction, not of incoherence, as the term contradiction could be understood, but of conflict between opposing tendencies, between conflict actions. Following in the footsteps of Jesus, the document says that we must sometimes follow a different logic of success and outcome in networks. In number 79 says, at the cross, everything was reversed. There were no likes and virtually no followers at the moment of the greatest manifestation of God's glory. In 37, the number 37 says, with the speed and immediacy of the digital culture, which tests our capacity for attention and concentration, listening becomes even more important in our spiritual life. A contemplative approach is countercultural, even prophetic, and can be formative not only for individuals, but for the culture as a whole. So the document brings many interesting ideas. For example, the document denounces inhuman attitudes on the networks and urge us to build more true relationships. For example, in 19, the number 19 says, at a time when we are increasingly divided, when each person retreats into his or her own filtered bubble, social networks become a path that leads many to indifference, polarization, and extremism. When individuals do not treat each other as a human beings, but as mere expressions of a certain point of view that they do not share, we witness another expression of the throwaway culture, which proliferates the globalization and normalization of indifference. The way forward is to cultivate a culture of encounter that promotes friendship and peace among different people. And number 21 says, the parable of the Good Samaritan challenges to confront the digital throwaway culture and to help each other to step out of our own comfort zone, making a voluntary effort to reach out to the other. So this document denounces the loss of complete attention, something we already know but needs to be said again, because we are in this kind of dynamic of this attention economy. So it brings the deep meaning of community too. In 45 says, being community means sharing with others the fundamentals true about what one has and who one is. So many points we can share and see that have some message for us, for the humanity today. Many things that we can learn and we can see that has sense for today's life. This document talk about a distinctive style of Christian communication too. Communication at its deepest level lies in the offering of oneself in love. So communicating in the style of God requires not only that we speak well, have mastery of the technique, but above all, that we love well and intensely. So bring this communal dimension of the true communication. the true is revealed in communion. So there is an urgent demand for us to act, not only as individuals, but as communities. So this is a little bit about this document that I bring, and I think has this prophecy of full present, this challenge for us, how to have this full presence in each thing that we do in this time so dispersive, so difficult to have to pay attention in the things completely. So that's it, just some thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Aline, for sharing your insights into this document from just last week. And I've just put the link to the document in the chat, so it was quite comfortable now that you mentioned also the numbers of the different sections, so we could follow a little bit on what you explained. Okay, great. So now let's turn to our third speakers. We are running a little bit out of time, but I mean, it's so huge topics here this morning. So it's just probably how it works. I know from Katleho that he's, as he wrote to me, he's in transit, whatever that means, but his network might not work. So I just want to call, I see, oh yeah, he's around. Okay. That's
yes,
great.
I'm around.
That's great, Katleho. Good to hear you. So let me just also very briefly introduce you. Katleho is a PhD candidate at the University of Pretoria, and he will today explore a little bit about Ubuntu ethics and emerging technologies. Yesterday, he has already, whoever was around, he has already somehow tested the spirit, so to say, which was most exciting and insightful. And so we see what is going to happen today. I just also like to recommend you a text called Prophetic Witness in Cyberspace During the Pandemics from 2023. And so we will hear now today about the faith-based prophetic practice from the perspective of Ubuntu, as a South African philosophy, of course. Maybe also one final word about your confessional background. You are a member of the Uniting Reformed Church in South Africa, and you're not only a member, you're also a minister of the OXA in South Africa. So now, floor is open, Katleho, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, no, thank you very much. Yeah, as I've said, that I am in transit, meaning I'm just moving from one place to another, and the network might be a problem. And as I've heard that, yeah, time is limited, so I won't take much time. I just wanted to speak about, in broad essence, especially in the context of Africa, is that there are many indigenous ideologies, many indigenous philosophies that can be incorporated, or whereby we can utilize in order to theologize or to think about things in our current context. It is very important because for the longest of times, there has been epistemicide in Africa, whereby our own indigenous knowledge systems have been, suppressed and never gaining light into the world. But there's a growing number of scholarship currently that is unearthing those indigenous knowledge systems in order to incorporate them and to use in philosophy as well as in theology. So I'm going to shortly discuss about faith-based prophetic practice from the perspective of Ubuntu, which is Southern African philosophy, and the essence of Ubuntu is on human dignity. So it derives from the phrase "Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu," which is loosely translated as "I am because we are." Now, African theology and Black liberation of theology have engaged this philosophy from an African Christian perspective, that spirituality is in essence life-affirming and life-giving. Theology is a discourse of life, but not all theology is a theology of life. Faith-based prophetic practice stands against theologies that promote racism, institutional exclusion, inequality, gender-based violence, patriarchy, and homophobia, amongst other forms of life-denying theologies. Faith-based prophetic practice from the perspective of Ubuntu is thus a theology that is centered on the poor, marginalized, oppressed, discriminated, and excluded. It strives for human dignity, socio-economic justice, and epistemic justice. Now, because the conference is about digital prophetic communication, or an intersection of theology and the digital, it comes to mind because in Africa there's a lot of digital divide because of the inequality that is inherent in African countries. Now, this digital divide perpetuates, marginalized communities, the poor, further into marginalization and further into poverty. And the importance of faith-based prophetic practice is to make it important that those in the margins are brought into the forefront. Those in the margins are basically well taken care of and are being able to be assisted in order for them to be in the digital space as well. But then there's also a critical point in regards to the digital space. Seeing there are some foundations, some organizations that strive for everyone in the world to be connected to the internet. Yes, the internet provides opportunities, the internet provides information that is important for society today. And there's a lot one can do within the internet as well to develop personally as well in different areas of life. But then when we look at the internet, the majority language or the language that is most used in the internet is English. Indigenous languages are marginalized in the internet as well. I've also heard from previous speakers and yesterday's conference, how it is important to have indigenous languages also within the digital space. So just in short, faith-based prophetic practice from the perspective of Ubuntu centers itself on the poor, the marginalized, and the discriminated and the excluded to be in a safe space when they are surfing on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katleho, from your transit somewhere in the middle of South Africa, I suppose. And thanks for being so clear and brief at the same time. So I hope you can still follow our discussion, and wherever you like to integrate yourself, join in, just give us a signal so that we know that you'd also like to contribute further to the discussion. So first of all, thank you very much to the three of you and your presentations. So I suggest we give ourselves about 15 minutes among the 3 or 4 of us, and then we open up for the plenary, as I said before. Listening to your presentations, I'd like to start with raising a question that might be something like well, at least you seem to be connected in that perspective, maybe. So talking about the digital prophets and prophets of the digital, I wonder, could it be that this is what you explained, and we know all about these digital transformations? Could it be that this is a huge opportunity for something like reshaping theology as a practice of maybe micro-user theology, theology I heard from on the ground, from the lay people, participatory? Katleho spoke about the marginalized and the poor. So could it be that the digital transformation is also a catalyst for something like a new thinking about theology, its production, its stakeholders, its logics beyond the institutions we somehow represent and we somehow think about? So maybe Anthony, if you'd like to pick up on that, and then Aline might follow, because I mean, both of you are very somehow highly connected to institutionalized forms of the Catholic Church on one side, but I heard you speaking very much on behalf almost of all the people that make the Catholic Church a Catholic Church.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I would like to sort of stress something that Aline also mentioned, that the process of creating the document on social media was actually intentionally to be a synodal process. And so it engaged, as was said, not only experts, but also young people, and also different peoples, even non-Catholics as well, in the process of consultation. So in a way, it's an institutional document, but in the process of developing it, it enlisted the voices of quite a range of different people. And I think this is sort of a new model for how we develop theological papers, or also positions in the church. And I think this goes well with this whole synodal process that's taking place in the church, that we need to listen to the voices of the various segments of the church. And I think in the area of technology, the church definitely does not have monopoly over technology. In fact, this is where the church really has to hand over a lot of its expertise to the people on the ground, to the lay people, to the innovators, to the users, and so on, to help the church to develop that theology. So I think what you're proposing is a very high possibility, and it's something that the church should really consider going forward.
May I just, before I also ask Aline about her comment, may I just be a little bit provocative and ask back, Anthony, is this what you just described as the synodal process? Would you consider that as the ultima ratio of the Catholic Church due to the to a situation they have to face in terms of public reputation, and they have to do something against that? Or is that something which really is a consistent theological perspective of the Catholic Church?
Well, the synodal process is actually not a new process. Pope Francis didn't really invent something that's new from scratch. He actually takes an old tradition, but actually is using it in this present context, because every context has its new situations and its new issues and concerns and so on. And so it's really an application of an old model to a new context. And I think this is the way the Holy Spirit works, and there's always opportunities for renewing, and there's always opportunities for recontextualizing certain concepts. And I think this is what's happening with the synodal process.
Thank you very much. Great. Aline.
Okay, I think I will follow the steps of Anthony that brings this characteristic of synodality that we are rebuilt in the church, as he says it in the primary church. It was this. It has this synodality, this share, this listen, and we are trying now. Pope Francis is trying now to recover this aspect of the way of the church do and be do things. So this document has this characteristic. And for example, Daniela was one of the of the prophets of the digital in this document.
Oh, we didn't know about that yet.
Yeah,
so that's nice to hear.
I just knew now. And I know other people that participate in this production. So I was thinking when you ask, in one of the most important documents of communication in the church from Vatican Council, the Inter Mirifica, I remember read about that they are looking for this phenomenon of mass communication, and we need to reflect about it. And the fathers there try to write about it and have a lot of paragraphs, a huge document should be, but they have so many questions inside and outside about it that they has this conscience. We doesn't know so much. We are not experts. So they made this document very short, not huge as they thought about, and they think we will to do another document after, with specialists helping us to understand and to build this reflection that is important. So I think how do you ask? For today, it happens in this document, and the global network helps a lot to do this job, because have people from many countries that could contribute online, could share thoughts, and they doesn't need to go in Rome, for example, to do that. So I think this global network reality experience, it's helping the Catholic Church, for example, to see that we are interconnected. We share a common home. We share this responsibility for the humanity. We are co-responsible. We are interdependent from each other. So I think it's it's a prophecy from the digital to the human reality, that we are conscious now of this, that it was already there, but we are not so conscious about it. And in the field of communication, when Catholic Church think about communication, it has already a tradition, I think could be said, that they are not thinking alone. They ask at least the experts, at least people that are researching or working that. For example, in Brazil, we released a document, a big document this year about the Directory of Communication of the Church. That it was a synodal process we from many meetings online. The year before, we produce, reflect, work in this text. So, and it is like a magistery of the Brazilian church, this document, but who wrote this was lay people that is assessoring this reflection. So I think we are in not just adapting of how the world is going, but we are really building something new or renew in the church.
Thank you very much, Aline. I don't know whether Daniela wants to say something in her defense.
Well, I want to say two things.
Yes, please.
First of all, it's in the Catholic context, it's proper to say the authorship is the church, you know, so we don't put names on. But yes, myself and others were close to the composition of this process, if you will. Okay. Right. Anthony as well here and others. And I will say too, I'm very grateful. This is the first time I'm hearing somebody make interpretation and commentary about it. And so that's beautiful. And now it has a life of its own. And I will just also underscore the point made here that whenever we have these teaching documents, for those of us in church communities that have authoritative documents like this, they're sort of are this thing, and we don't often think about, you know, how they came to be or who's behind them. And it's true that for this particular one, it was very, very much a listening to a lot of expertise, a lot of opinions, a lot of young people actually contributed to it, young professionals. And I think that's awesome. It truly had an accessibility to its composition from a lot of people around the world. And I think that itself is a prophetic contribution to really have that spirit of listening. Anthony, I love that you said when you defined prophet, that a prophet is a person with the ability to listen to the people and to God's word. I think that was right on. I've never heard it that way. And insofar as that, I think this was the creation of this document had a strong commitment to listening throughout. So I will just say that, but this is, I'm very grateful, Aline and others who've thought with us on this.
Thank you very much. And it's most exciting to hear about also the impact of the global network into such an important document. And I will certainly dig into that. And it's about, I don't know, I think it's 10 pages or something if you do a printout. So as you said, Aline, there is a good reason for not obviously developing a huge paper to really make it readable for many people. Still, one might ask how this kind of participatory action process, so to say, in developing this document will really not only be reflected by the Catholic Church, but will also find its kind of transformative practice, because we all know that it is always also an authority and a power problem. That's not a thing only on the side of the Catholics, but of all religious communities, having to deal with with the micro users and the micro influences we find in all the religious communities. It will be very interesting to see how this balance will work out between religious institutional logic and dogmatics, for example, and the individual interpretations of theology in our case. So as Katleho defined Ubuntu, saying, "I am because we are," we could also think whether this is something we should take into consideration for our own understanding of the church. I am because we are, or we are because I am. So just a brief thought. Okay, we have another 15 minutes or so. I don't know whether, Katleho, you are following our discussion. I'd like to whether you'd like to contribute. Here's my latest article. Okay, that's the contribution, prophetic witness in cyberspace during pandemics. Okay, everybody might take that from the chat. And there was a comment from Ralph Peter on Ubuntu, if I just saw that. Okay, Ralph, do you want to explain a little bit about your comment?
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Just like I heard the term Ubuntu talk from somebody from Africa, and I'm using right now the operating system Ubuntu. So it's free software. I mean, it's a little bit off topic maybe, but talking about digital justice and socioeconomics, does this really like translate into, like, for example, free software in order to like bridge the digital gap? Maybe it's just like a thought or a comment on that. So it's like taking the term Ubuntu maybe to author praxis.
Yes.
Okay, Katleho likes to react on
No,
that.
thank you very much.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
A little bit difficult at the moment. Okay, it doesn't seem to work at the moment. Okay, we wait for a more stable connection. Okay, are there any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it might be better. Try again, Katleho. No, not really. Maybe you can put a comment in the chat or an answer you'd like to provide for us. Okay, any other questions at the moment to Anthony or Aline or Daniela?
If I may ask a question to Anthony. Anthony, I liked also very much in your presentation, you making the point about the church, and the church's dialogue, that it's necessary, that mode of engagement. And I was thinking, this is in the Catholic context, we had a late theologian, Cardinal Avery Dulles, who famously talked about the church being communication. The church is communication. He said this in the 1970s, and it's often quoted in some of our circles. And I connected that to when you said the church is dialogue. And I wonder if you were going in the same vein, and if that resonates, and how do you think that impacts ecclesiology? I know that's a big question, but if we're thinking of church not just as communication, but as dialogue in particular, a particular kind of communication, can you give us a little forecast of what you think that means for ecclesiology, for engagement?
Well, I think Vatican II had a very good insight when it used the metaphor of the people, the church as the people of God. So it switched from this sort of highly hierarchical model of church to a very kind of people-based model, whereas the people is the primary component of the church. And so, and when you have people, it necessarily requires a relationship, right? There's relationship in the church and people and beyond the church. And how do you build relationship? Relationship is built based on communication and dialogue. So dialogue is and communication is essential to the life of the church. And I think the synodal process that we are having now is this this channel of facilitating that dialogue of speaking and listening. And I think this is going to be even more necessary in the years to come, because as we expect Web 3.0, which is going to make decentralization the primary mode of operation in terms of business, in terms of how you run your various institutions and so on. Decentralization is going to become more ingrained in people's mentality. And in this kind of new context, if the church tries to hold on to this sort of authoritative structure that maybe it was once privileged to have, it's going to be really out of place. And it needs to really replace with this new model of listening and dialogue and speaking. And I think the sooner the church really gets used to this kind of a process, then the more it's prepared for when decentralization really sort of is the way society operates. And instead of become passive recipient of this new way of operating, the church actually sort of reappropriates this decentralization in the way that it benefits the life of the church in a positive way. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe just to connect, and then I come back to John. As a follow-up to that discussion, I was wondering, Aline, I was mentioning your article on digital catechesis and the subtitle From Transmission to Sharing. Could you explore in a few sentences the impact for education from what we just heard from Anthony? Less hierarchical, more participatory, and so forth. And I read your subtitle a little bit in that direction, from transmission to sharing. What does that mean for education, Christian education?
Yeah, I think even the new pedagogies, network pedagogy, and many pedagogy that we are starting to use in education in general, is reflecting too in the way that we do Christian education, that we do catechesis. From an idea that Pope Francis brings, that Antonio Spadaro reflect about it, is a challenge of these times, is not to pass this process of this idea of pastoral of transmission, because evangelization usually brings the idea of transmitting the faith, that is unilateral, unidirectional communication. But today, with digital communication, we have this multi-directional communication, or that means people are not just announcer or receiver of the message. People are both missions, both roles. So in catechesis, in evangelization, in pastoral, we are not just as a pastoral agent or catechist. We are not just teach the people that comes to catechesis. We share with them what we share. The document talk about share, for example, good stories, good testimony of experience, of relationship, of community. So this is the idea in this paper that I wrote, that is changing. But catechesis doesn't not to be a simple transmission, a simple give some documents, give some teaching to the people, but we share, we learn from the people too. So this is the idea. Even children, even young people, all people have something to learn and something to teach. So this is the idea, share experience, live an experience with the group too. So this is the idea, and if we see the education today, they are going in this direction too.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a some kind of chat conversation. John, you raised a question about the micro-influencers. Maybe you can speak about that to all of us, and there was some reactions already.
I think it's very exciting. The idea of Christians being involved as influencers. I'm preparing a sermon on Matthew 28, teaching the gospel. So the idea that this becomes not simply something for the leadership, but for everyone is, I think, interesting. But of course, Paul had to impose rules in the Corinthian congregation to make sure that everybody wasn't speaking at once. So any suggestions as to how we manage this?
Okay, very straightforward question. Maybe we get some straightforward answers by Anthony and Aline. I do not see Katleho at the moment. Okay, Anthony, would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah.
Maybe Aline can go before me. I was busy reading through the chat, so I didn't exactly hear the question. So can maybe Aline can address it before I do.
No problem. Yeah, I was doing for 2 years research about the digital influencers. So this part of document that brings it was very interesting to me. But I, with other researchers, are researching about the macro, the biggest influencers, digital influencers in Brazil, Catholic digital influencers. And what we saw that the biggest Catholic digital influencers are priests. So we made a big list, 100 influencers, and the most 8% are priests. So this idea of lay people being influencers, it's true if we saw the micro influencers. And what we saw in this research is that many times micro influencers has more powerful in this small group than biggest influencers, than macro influencers. So this phenomenon is very huge and have many sides. And what we bring them and talk, it's the challenge. I think it was one of the reasons that they made this document, because we are not having a good dialogue between them. So I'm not sure if I have an answer how we lead, how we deal with it, because I think it is the big question.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Now we've actually run almost out of time, but I see Anthony and Alex very briefly. Maybe your question. And oh, here Jonas talks about Justin Bieber as the most influential Christian influencer. Okay, here we go. But now Alex, and then Anthony, maybe for your final brief statement.
Okay, I just want to extend the discussion to a broader context, especially on what John has said. Much of our Christianity is under governments that are controlling the social media, and also the ones of using AI in surveillance, generative context. So in terms of macro as being macro influences for Christians are actually no. So I think there's a room to extend our discussion to micro influences for Christians in restrictive countries.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Anthony, briefly, last statement.
Yes. So actually, everybody can be a micro influencer or macro influencer. But the thing is, and I think the document really focused on this, the fully present document, is that a lot of people are not yet intentional in their use of social media. They're not intentional in the way that they use it. That's why they don't realize that they are already micro influencers in their ways. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to somehow instill in everybody who are users of social media that they are already potential micro influencers, and it all has to do with how they are intentional in the way they use it. And I think that's where we switch from being just a casual user to an influencer.
Okay, thank you very much. We've come to the end of our session. Daniela has put in the comment on Aline's connection of baptism and influencing. So you might also read that. And then we stop here. I'd like to thank the panelists and also all participants who involved in discussion, questions, answers. Thank you very much. And we follow Jonas, I think, in about 15 minutes with the next session. Is that right?
Yeah, just in 15 minutes, quarter past. Sorry,
Great.
quarter past. I just wanted to give one notice, and that is just for people who might come and go during the day, that the last thing that will happen today is just a little session where we get to debrief a bit, but also for us to tell you what's going on with the Global Network for Digital Theology, and we are looking for your input there as well. So that's
Okay.
6 o'clock UK time. I don't know what that ends up being in your part of the world.
Okay, so see you then in a quarter of an hour.